What is going on, Swayze gang? Welcome back to the channel. Thank you so much for tuning in. Make sure you hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. In today's video, we're going to be addressing the million-dollar question, which is, what do I do for a living and how in the world do I afford this car? Alright, so we're actually going to be jumping inside the vehicle because even though I talk about how this is a very, very dry winter, it is snowing outside. So we don't want to get wet. We don't want to get my nice camera wet. So let's jump inside the Hellcat and talk about everything we're going to discuss in today's video. Alright, so since I picked up this car back in October, I've probably had like 30 people ask me, what in the world do I do for a living? And at the same time, what does my fiance do? Because you obviously see the cars that are on the channel. We've had a Range Rover, we've had two separate Challengers, a Hellcat and a Scat Pack. You've seen my Toyota as well. I'm also purchasing a Bronco in the future, and there's actually another car that you guys haven't seen yet, which you will see in the next couple weeks. But it makes sense for a lot of you to wonder, what in the world do I do for a living? How do I afford all these cars? And that is a very good question that I'm going to address in today's video. Now, in the second part of this video, I'm actually going to discuss exactly how much I pay for this car per month, because I did not pay for it outright in cash. I am making monthly payments on this car, and I'll talk about that in the second half of the video. So to kick it off, I am currently 26 years old. I actually picked up this car when I was 25. Age does not really matter when you purchase your car. It all depends on what your financial situation is. Even if you can't afford a Hellcat, you even have maybe $70,000 in cash, does not mean you should go out and buy a Hellcat. Everybody's financial situation is different. And regardless of age, that doesn't mean that some person is successful and another one is not. But full disclosure, I picked this car up when I was 25. And the reason I chose this car was discussed in the previous video. I'll put it up on the screen right now so you guys can check it out. And I also discussed the MSRP and options of this car in that video as well. Now, I graduated the University of Utah several years ago with my bachelor's degree in finance. Now, I also got a minor in political science, but I don't really use that on a day-to-day basis in my career. I actually started my career at the University of Utah going into a totally different major, and partway through my college career I pivoted and shifted to something I felt I was a little bit more passionate about, which was finance. And that is a very common story for anybody out there, especially if you're in college right now and watching this video. It takes a lot of guts to actually change what you're doing halfway through your college career, because you realize you've probably got student loans. And so it is a very big decision to pivot. So I relate to a lot of you out there that have done that. And I made that decision because I felt like I was more passionate about finance than really any other major out there. I was always interested in stocks and bonds and investing and everything like that. And even though I've somewhat pivoted my interests within the realm of finance, I still know that finance is what I'm most passionate about when it comes to a career. Now, without diving into the details, I work in the banking industry, and I've done so over the last few years, and I really enjoy what I do. Now, to squash all of the assumptions that people may have, I am not the CEO of the company. I'm not even like a higher up or an executive of any sorts. I am just your average employee, just like a lot of people are in the industry. I work about 40 to 50 hours a week, sometimes more, but for the most part, I have a pretty good work schedule. Now, that being said, I do work really hard at what I do, and I think I'm pretty good at it, but anybody who applies themselves to anything can be good at what they do, regardless of what it is. So I'm sure this is disappointing to a lot of you people out there, but no, I did not start up my company, and no, I did not win the lottery when I was 20 years old. And the same goes for my fiance, because I know a lot of you have asked about that. How do you guys have a Range Rover and two Challengers? Well, she also graduated in the degree of finance. That is actually kind of how we met in college. Now, she actually does something totally different than me, but also does a very good job at it, and it's also in the field of finance. Okay, so if I'm not some executive and I haven't won $1 million in the lottery, how do I afford this car? Well, at the end of the day, it comes down to what your priorities are. I personally prioritize cars over pretty much anything else. Any other expenses, cars is my number one. And it's always been like that. From the very first day when I picked up my Mercedes C300, I pretty much put everything I had into that car. And that's not necessarily the correct financial decision, but everybody has their own priorities. A lot of people here in Utah, spend thousands of dollars every single year for ski passes, for snowboard gear, for eating up at the lodges and ski resorts. People have a passion for skiing and snowboarding, and I can totally understand that passion. I mean, it makes perfect sense because we have what a lot of people say is the greatest snow on earth. I personally suck at snowboarding and skiing. I've actually never tried skiing. I've only snowboarded, and I fell on my butt so many times that I did not find it to be an enjoyable experience. Part of the problem is because I never did it as a kid. I only started when I was an adult. And as an adult, it takes a lot longer to learn that type of skill than when you're like 4 years old and you constantly fall, but you get back up a lot easier. So for me, skiing and snowboarding is not a thing. I don't spend $1 every single year on going up to the ski resorts, whereas a lot of people here do. Another thing that a lot of people spend money on that I personally don't is going out and buying coffee. I can probably count on one hand how many times in the last year I've gone out and bought a cup of coffee at Starbucks. Most of the time it's because somebody has given me a Starbucks gift card. I just don't do it. I personally love coffee. I drink probably like 5 cups a day, which really isn't healthy at all, but I brew my own coffee at home. I just buy the grounds at my local Walmart for like $5, and that lasts me for probably about a week. So I just don't go out and buy coffee. Now, there's nothing wrong with people who do that. I totally understand people who go out and pay $5 to $10 for 1 cup of coffee just to have that experience, to go inside of a coffee shop, sit down, work on your laptop. You get all the smells, you get all the experiences, the color, the mood. I totally understand why people do that. I just personally don't. When it comes to buying clothes, for the most part, I have to dress up for my work. But most of the clothes that I have are actually several years old. I usually don't go and buy new clothes until my old clothes have ripped, or unless somebody has bought me some clothes as a birthday or Christmas gift. And again, there's nothing wrong for people who go out and shop and buy clothes. Everybody has their interests. Everybody has their own priorities.
It's your money. Use it when you need it.
Call 866.
The reason I'm explaining this story and these examples is because I personally spend a lot of money on cars. Money that a lot of people would say that is dumb to spend on a vehicle, but in my opinion, it's my priority, it's my interest, it's what I love to do, and that is why I'm okay spending that money on a car. Now, aside from working in banking, as a lot of you know, I upload YouTube videos. I love what I do. I love talking about my cars. I love pointing out new features, and I absolutely love it when people reach out to me and say they bought a specific car because of some of the content I've put out in my videos. And as many of you know, because some of you are also YouTubers, you make some money off of YouTube, primarily through ad revenue, there's sponsorships, and there's also merchandise. Now, I do make a little bit of money from YouTube on a monthly basis, and that helps pay for some of my car expenses, some of the mods that I do, and some of the travel experiences and videos that I put out on YouTube. Now, I hope to continue growing that in the future, and that is part of the reason why I invest so much time into YouTube, because I see it as an outlet to continue to grow and continue to maybe supplement my income or potentially replace my income. But for now, it is a fun hobby that happens to pay for some of the stuff I put out on YouTube. All right, so now the question you guys have been waiting for, which is, what do I pay monthly for my Hellcat? This will help answer the question as to how I afford paying for this car, because I'm sure a lot of you think I pay at least $1,000 to $1,500 every single month for this car. And the truth is, I don't. I actually pay $600 a month for my Hellcat. It's actually a little bit less than 600, but I'm rounding the numbers. $600 a month is how much I pay monthly to drive around in a 717 horsepower car. Now, how in the world do I do this? Well, the answer is simple. I am leasing my Hellcat. I already know I'm going to get probably 1 million negative comments because I'm leasing and I'm not financing, and it is a horrible decision to make, and you're just leasing your car, you don't actually own it, yada, yada, yada. There is so many negative comments on leasing cars when at the end of the day, 95% of them are absolutely wrong. All right, now before I dive into why leasing is a very good option, it's not the only option, it's not the best option. It really depends on your financial situation and what you really need out of your car. Before I dive into those details, I'm going to talk about how much I paid for this lease and how I got the numbers to where I'm at. So as you guys know, I had some equity left over in my Challenger Scat Pack. I knew that used car prices were really high at the time of me buying this car, and so I knew I could put probably a good amount of cash back into my pocket if I were to sell the car. So I did the math and I figured out how much money I'd actually put back in my pocket, and I realized that if I put down $8,500 on this Hellcat, I could get the payment somewhere around $600 a month. Now for the Scat Pack, I was paying about $500 a month. So the difference is about $100, but I would be driving around in a much more powerful vehicle. Now, the way I got this car payment down to $600 a month is because at the time of searching for this car, Dodge had some really amazing lease incentives on this vehicle. And even today, if you guys go on the Dodge website, you'll find some really good offers. I think that they may not be as good as when I purchased this car, but they're probably about within 20 bucks of what it was when I was looking at this vehicle, because per Dodge's website, I believe you could have leased a wide-body Challenger Hellcat for about $539 a month. Now, keep in mind, that is the very base Hellcat, one that you will never find on the dealership floor. It was like a base price of $66,000, and for comparison, this one is $78,000. So it's really not realistic, those numbers that they provide. What I really love about the Dodge website is you can find what inventory is within your area within 150 miles, and it will actually calculate the exact lease payment that you can expect to pay for a particular VIN number of a car. So you can pull up whatever inventory is in your area, click the calculate payment button, and it'll pull up exactly what you can expect to pay. And what's nice about that is you can use that as negotiating power when you go to your dealership and they're asking you to pay $100 more than what the Dodge dealership website is telling you. Keep in mind, the website does not list any taxes that you're going to have to pay. Unfortunately, taxes are unavoidable, and you're going to have to pay those depending on what the state tax is in your area. Now, to give you some background, I have leased a car in the past. I've leased my Mercedes C300. I also financed it at the end of its lease term. I financed my used Dodge Challenger Scat Pack. I leased this car, and in the past, I've actually paid outright cash for a car without financing or leasing. So I have had experience with all of the different types of ways that you can buy a car, and that is why I'm giving you this advice. I haven't just leased cars my entire life, and that is the only area of expertise that I have. And in my experience, leasing is a great way to get into a new car, but it may not be the best way. It really depends on your financial situation. But to outright say leasing is a bad idea is completely wrong. And sorry to say, but you actually look pretty dumb for saying that. Now, as I said earlier, I put $8,500 down, and I'm leasing this car for a little less than $600 a month over 36 months with a max of 10,000 miles per year. Now, a good rule of thumb that I have learned in my past experience leasing cars, my advice is that you put about 10% of the MSRP as a down payment on your lease. And if you do that, take that 10% down payment, subtract it from the MSRP of the car, and 1% of that total should be your monthly payment for the vehicle. There's a lot of math involved there, but what I want to say is, for example, this car was $78,000. If I put $7,800 down, let's just round it to $8,000 for simplicity purposes, I have put $8,000 towards the MSRP, so the amount that I have to essentially finance would be $70,000. If I'm getting a pretty good lease, my monthly payment will be 1% of that, so it would be $700 a month. And you can apply this math to pretty much any vehicle and determine if leasing the car is a good option and if the lease is actually a good deal. If you do that math and you realize the dealership is charging you $900 a month, you should probably stay away from leasing that car, because I guarantee you the interest rate or some other fees are higher than what they actually should be. Now, if you guys are following along and you can do the math on what I did to my car, why did I put $8,500 down when I'm recommending to do 10%? Well, there's actually two reasons. The first being, I wanted to make sure my monthly payment was maxed at $600 a month. I did not want to pay $1 more than that. And in order to get there, I had to put a little bit more down payment on the car because the MSRP of my car is pretty high. Now, that being said, I also had some equity in my Challenger Scat Pack, so I knew that I'd be able to recoup that money when I was to sell the car in the future. So had I just put $7,800 down on my car, my monthly payment would probably be around $630 to $640 a month, and that still would be a very good lease, seeing as how my monthly payment would still be less than 1% of the amount my car actually costs. But to me, it was a little bit more than I was willing to pay, so I wanted to make up for that difference by putting in a larger down payment. So now that we've discussed the details on my specific lease, I wanted to talk about exactly why I decided to lease a car rather than maybe going out and buying a used Hellcat. Well, the nice thing about leasing is because it gets you into a brand new vehicle. I know when I sat down in this car, there were no other owners. There was nobody else that beat up this vehicle. I am the only idiot that is redlining this car and having fun with it. That being said, there's also a lot of new features that come out every single year. And so a good advantage of leasing is you constantly get the newest, funnest, safest features that the industry has because you're buying a new car. The other reason I decided to lease a new car versus buy a used car is because, like I said, used car prices are absolutely absurd right now. And I found that on a monthly payment basis, it would actually be cheaper for me to lease a brand new Hellcat than buy a used Hellcat. Another advantage of buying a new Hellcat is I am able to get a 3-year, 36,000 mile warranty, which is really important when you're buying a supercharged 717 horsepower engine, because if you buy used, you just don't know how the previous owner drove the vehicle. Now, the second obvious reason why I chose to lease versus buy is because I have a lower monthly payment. Like I said, I am paying a little less than $600 per month. The third reason why I decided to lease is, given the very good incentives that Dodge has, my interest rate on this car is 0.264%. Yes, you heard that correctly. The APR on this car is 0.264%. And that is another very, very good reason to lease a car. Generally speaking, you can get a much lower interest rate on a lease than you can when you finance a car. Now, one thing to remember here is when you lease a car, they don't really reference it as an interest rate. It's actually called the money factor. And I would recommend every single person leasing a car to ask your dealership, what is the money factor on this lease? It's actually going to be a really long decimal that you're going to have to multiply by 2,400 in order to arrive at your annual interest rate. So for example, my money factor on this car was 0.00011. If you take that number and multiply it by 2,400, you'll arrive at an annual percentage rate of 0.264%. Now, I don't know of very many banks that will finance a car for 0.264% over 3 or 4 years. The only time I've seen a better interest rate than that is from the actual manufacturer when they offer a 0% interest rate if you finance through them, but typically those terms are limited to like 60 months, so your monthly payment is still going to be pretty high. So in my opinion, it is much better to lease a car with a very low interest rate for the first 3 years, and at the end of the lease, you will finance it either through a bank or a credit union and be able to pay a very similar monthly payment at a slightly higher interest rate. Now, another very good reason to lease versus finance is if you own a business. If you have a business and you happen to have a car that you need for business purposes, for example, let's say you are a flower shop and you need a vehicle to deliver flowers from location to location, then you can actually deduct the entire payment of your lease on your tax return and reduce your tax liability. Unfortunately, you actually can't do that if you're financing a car. The only thing you can do is you can write off the amount of interest that you pay on your auto loan as a tax deduction. But that generally, unless you have a really high interest rate, is not as high as an entire lease payment. Now, there's definitely some rules and limits when it comes to lease deductions. And I am by no means a tax advisor or CPA, so I definitely recommend you consult with your accountant or perhaps look it up online and see if something like that applies to you and your business, because you can't just write off a $100,000 lease payment as a business tax return deduction. But I am just pointing it out that that is another advantage that you may have if you choose to lease a car versus financing one. I do recommend, if you are looking for a Dodge specifically and you want to see if you can find these numbers, take a look at the Dodge website. It really is probably one of the best websites I've ever seen from a manufacturer, because it really breaks down your leasing and your financing payments, and you can really use that as negotiating power when you go to your dealership. So I hope you guys enjoyed today's video. It was definitely longer than I probably planned for it to be, but there was a lot to discuss. Now you guys have a little bit of a deeper look as to how I afford these cars, seeing as how there are a lot of people that pay $600 a month for a Honda Accord. That doesn't mean that is a wrong decision, but I am just saying my monthly payment for my cars is not an insane amount, and that is how I afford paying for these cars. Now, I am certain I have missed something when it comes to this car or leasing or financing or whatever. And so if you guys really have any questions, I'm always happy to answer them in the comments below. Let me know if you have any confusion about leasing, because I would like to say I know probably more than the average person when it comes to leasing a car, because I've done it so many times over the years. Like always, don't forget to like, share, comment, and subscribe to the channel. Make sure you hit that notification bell so you can stay on top of all of the weekly videos. Also find me on Instagram at Schwazy_ and on TikTok with the same handle. I really appreciate all of you guys' support, and hopefully I provided some new information in this video for you guys to make an informed decision in the future. Like always, stay Schwazy, stay healthy, and have a wonderful day.